Welcome to the Everybody Matters podcast. This show is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. Don't forget to connect with us on the web at barry-wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening to the Everybody Matters podcast. We appreciate all your support and hope that we are educational. We hope we are an encouragement. We hope that we are a light on your leadership journey. And in this first episode of the year, we wanted to bring you something special. A couple of weeks ago, Barry-Wehmiller CEO Bob Chapman spoke virtually to a book club of folks who reside around his home in Aspen, Colorado. It was an intimate discussion where the participants were able to ask Bob questions after they had read the book he co-authored with Raj Zodia, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family. We thought you might enjoy an edited version of the conversation where Bob talks about a number of things from the book, but also talks about recent events in our company and gives some thoughts on the state of the world. And the discussion starts off with a question by the moderator, Amy French.
So my first question, from the challenges that you experienced in your business career in transforming Barry-Wehmiller, what key learnings stand out that you can share with our audience this evening?
I think for your audience, a tiny bit of background. My background was I got an accounting degree from Indiana. And if you asked me why I became an accountant, I'd say I have no idea. The greatest compliment somebody ever gave me is, I can't believe you're an accountant. But I did get an accounting degree and went on to get an MBA at Michigan and then went to Pricewaterhouse. So, one of the things, I don't have a psychology background, anthropology background. I'm a classic business manager career background with a decent education, and I was not exceptional. One of the things I hope you get out of this is in my career, I would say to you, it's not my intellect that allowed me to do well. It is my common sense and creativity. That to me, as I've given these talks around the world, and I look back on it, I was just blessed with the ability to see value where other people were not. So the first half of my career was a very traditional career. My dad died when I was 30. The company was 18 million. It was financially fragile. I had joined it from Pricewaterhouse at my dad's invitation. And my first part of my career was to try and make something of my dad's hard work for the 20 years he had owned this company and tried to transform it, but was unable to. He worked hard at it, and he had 2 heart attacks and was physically pretty tired. And so basically, again, my first half of my career, and the beauty of my career was because my dad died when I was 30, and I had just 6 years in the company, so I had a good awareness. I was ready for the challenge. But I also made a lot of basic mistakes. I grew too fast. I tried too many things. And in 1983, my banks pulled on me. And what I tell students when I teach is my greatest lessons came from my biggest mistakes. There's an old expression, you only grow one way when you eat ice cream. Because I made my mistakes early, and because I'm an eternal optimist. It was so bad in 1983 that they repossessed our coffee maker because we hadn't paid the coffee service company in 6 months. We lived day to day. So from 1983 to 1987, we were in financial turmoil, and it was a day-to-day, month-to-month transition. But I never lost hope, and I never gave up. And the key is that I went from trying to take this old business that made brewery equipment, and I realized in 1983 that our history did not give us a future. So I worked to try and transform the company through acquisitions. My only problem is I had no money. The turning point from my traditional management standpoint was in 1983, I went to our finance team and I said, look, guys, I'm proud of our history, but making equipment for the brewing industry does not give us a future for a variety of reasons. And we need to do acquisitions, because I'd studied a company called Emerson Electric. My finance team looked at me and said, great idea, Bob. We only have one problem. And I said, what's that? And they said, we have no money, Bob. I'm just going to repeat this. Do you understand? We have no money. And my response, which is kind of embodies my personality, was, I didn't tell you I needed money. I told you we needed to do acquisitions. And I left that room unencumbered by the fact that I was broke. And I began doing acquisitions. So what do you buy when you have no money? You buy things nobody else wants, and they'll almost pay you to buy it. Okay. So that's what started transforming our company. So I found out I was pretty good because I was pretty intense, because again, we were on the edge of survival. And so I started turning these companies around in 1987. We did a spectacular transformation. We spun off 2/3 of the company, the acquisitions, on the London Stock Exchange, and Harvard wrote a case study because they couldn't believe we bought these broken little companies, put them together, and had a massively successful offering on the London Stock Exchange. So the company today, the $3 billion company again, is kind of was transformed in 1987. We spun off the acquisitions, and I was left with that historic business that was sick. But now I had the experiences of dramatic growth, dramatic decline, miraculous recovery. So one of the things I'd want you to know is that I designed a business model from my experiences from the late 70s and 80s. There's old expression, you need to get the right people on the bus. That's not really quite right. You need to build a safe bus, which is your business model. And you need drivers who know where they're going and how to get there. And then anybody who gets on the bus is going to be fine. So I was fortunate to have made some pretty serious mistakes in the 70s and 80s, survived it, never lost hope, had the miraculous recovery. And now in 1988, I had money, but I still had the old business. And it was about a $20 million business. So 115 acquisitions later today, we sit here today, and it's a $3 billion company. So my first half of my career was very traditional, but I had three transformative events occur to me in the late 1990s and early 2000 that changed me from what I call traditional management to what I call truly human leadership, which is caring for people. And the three events that I think are significant. The first event occurred in 1997 when I bought this company in South Carolina. And I flew down there, and the experience I experienced when I went down there was I said to myself, why can't business be fun? Why do we call it work? And I created these games aligned to value creation. I saw a transformation in the business performance when people started having fun. The second one occurred in St. Louis at our church when my mentor of the church was our rector, and I was very inspired by Ed Salmon. But one day I looked at Cynthia and said, Cynthia, the church has only got us for 1 hour a week. We have people for 40 hours a week. We are 40 times more powerful than the church to help people live lives of meaning and purpose. And I walked out of that church that day saying business could be the most powerful force for good in the world if we simply cared about the people we had the privilege of leading. And the third occurred in Aspen at the Roaring Fork Club, a wedding. And Cynthia and I were sitting there in the tent up by the pool at a wedding of a good friend. And as he was walking his daughter down the aisle, everybody oohed and ahhed how precious this young lady was, and how cute this young man was at the altar, and how proud the father was walking his daughter down the aisle. As he got up to the altar, he took the hand of his daughter and said, her mother and I give our daughter to be wed to this young man. And he sat down next to his wife and hugged each other. And my mind again went to a different place. I said, that's not what that father wanted to say. That's what he was told to say at the rehearsal dinner. What he wanted to say is, look at young man. Her mother and I brought this precious young lady into this world. We've given her all the love and care we could give her so she could be who she's intended to be. And we expect you, young man, through this marriage, for you to allow her to continue to be who she's intended to be through your powerful relationship. Do you understand that, young man? That is what every father wants to say as he gives away his precious daughter. And then my mind went to the most powerful transformation. I said, oh my God, all 12,000 people that work for us around the world are somebody's precious daughter or son who's been placed in our care. Now that last story, the way that built from why can't business be fun to business could be a source for good to everybody's somebody's precious child. As I've given dozens and dozens of these talks around the world, that wedding story at the Roaring Fork Club is the one everybody remembers. Because when you stop looking at people as a cab driver, a waiter at the Roaring Fork Club, a pro at the golf shop, and you look at them as somebody's precious child, you treat them dramatically different than you would when you see them as a function. So that's what transformed me from management to leadership. And then accidentally, we let people heard about this, started coming in, and our story started spreading around the world through people like Simon Sinek. So that's kind of how we this from traditional management. And I define the word management means the manipulation of others for your success, to leadership, which is the stewardship of the lives entrusted to you. I'll tell you a really neat story. I was interviewed by Washington University organizational development professors, and after an hour and a half, they said, "You're the first CEO we've ever talked to that never talked about their product." I said, "We've been talking about a product for the last hour and a half. It's our people. I won't go to my grave proud of the machinery we build. I will go to my grave proud of the people that built that machinery." And that startled them, because we tend to think of our company as defined by our product, not our people. So I hope that kind of gives you a feeling for I went from what I call management, which is what I was taught, to leadership, which is about caring for people. Amy, that's a long answer to your first question.
Well, no, that's a wonderful answer. And it's a great segue into, I think, what set your company apart when the 2008-2009 Great Recession happened. Most other businesses were laying off huge numbers of their team members, and you did not. So share with us what drove your unique approach to survive and thrive through the global financial challenge.
Well, a piece of that answer is about 15 years ago, we had tried some of these games to have people have fun, and we saw some dramatic change in behavior, and we started trying other little ideas, and we started seeing dramatic changes in joy, fun, performance. And we gathered together in actually Clearwater, Florida, and said, something bigger is going on here. And so we started writing down on the board, what were we experiencing? Why were all of a sudden these games and fun creating value? And we stood back from the board eventually, and we said, those are leadership principles. And we called them our guiding principles of leadership. And as we published this constitution of our leadership principles, it was about the time of the Enron scandal, which we're all aware of, that led to the demise of Arthur Andersen. And a lady that works for me, our human resource director, looked at me and said, "Bob, Enron had great values on the wall. They just didn't live them." And I took that as a challenge. I looked at it and I said, we're not going to put them in the wall. We're going to in people's heads and hearts. So I started traveling around the world saying, these are values we believe in. Talk to me about them and tell me how we're living them. And we started changing. And so I really got into this prophesizing on these guiding principles. So when 08, 09 hit, all of a sudden caught us completely off guard. Our orders dropped slightly, but we had a pretty good backlog. And so in January of 09, I flew down to Naples, Florida for our board meeting. I walked in the boardroom. We have an outstanding group of directors. My directors looked at me and said, "Bob, don't you think you need to lay off people?" I said, "Why do you say that?" And he said, "Well, because everybody is. I mean, don't we have to?" And I said, "I don't think so. I think we've got a pretty good backlog of orders, and I think we'll get through it." So we got through the meeting. Everybody's fine. About a month later, I'm in Italy, Lucca, Italy, at our operation in Italy. And I got an email from the States and said, a major consumer products company just put on hold a $20 million order in our largest operation. Just put on stop. We already had the order, down payment. We're already working on it. And so it's one thing not to get additional orders. Then all of a sudden, when your backlog disappears, you think, oh my God. And I remember sitting in my room in Italy and saying, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I remember all the preaching I'd been doing about caring about people. And I said to myself, if we let people go, we're going to hurt people. And it caused me to think differently. And I sat in my hotel room and I thought, well, what would a caring family do if a family had a crisis? We'd all pitch in and take a little pain so nobody would have to take a lot of pain. And so I emailed back to the States from my hotel room in Italy, and I said, what if we asked everybody to take a month off without pay? And we could get through this, whatever this is going to look like, because again, we didn't know. Downturn, I said, by the time I land, tell me how we can do that thoughtfully and properly. So by the time I landed, our team had thought about it. We announced that everybody was going to take a month off whenever they wanted to, okay? because we wanted them to have quality time with their family. So in exchange for them taking a month off, I wanted to give them time. And I was astounded at the reaction, because I would have done what everybody else did. You lay off people when your orders go down. It's not personal. It's just you don't have the work, you lay off people. People's reaction was unbelievable, because what they felt was, even though they were going to give up 1 month's pay, they sat and looked at the person on the right and the left and thought, I'm helping them save their job. And it was an act of compassion on their part to take a little hit, well, 1/12 their salary. And our morale went up when we announced it. We'd never done it, never heard of it, never thought of it. And so everybody took a month off at some time. We got through that without letting anybody go. And when the economy started to come up, our business started rising quickly, because we hadn't lost our people. We validated our culture. So that story has been told. I mean, Simon Sinek talks about that story all over the world, because we're taught, you downsize, you right size people, okay? And there's an expression that Simon Sinek has that you'll love. In the military, we honor those who give of themselves in service of others. And in business, we give people bonuses who sacrifice others in service of themselves. Why can't business, like the military, see its primary responsibilities with men and women in their care? And my position is they can, okay? And we got through that event, and we did more to validate our culture than anything we could do, because who you are in your worst of time is more a statement than anything else. So we had people volunteer to take somebody's time that they couldn't afford. They had a young family. They couldn't really afford to lose 1/12. So a senior person would go and say, I'll take one of your weeks, so you only have to take 3 weeks off. And that maybe that'll be easier. And then somebody else, people did volunteer work at their church. It was astounding, but it was stimulated by our guiding principles of leadership, which said, we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. And we touch our customers, we touch our team members, we touch our investors, we touch our bankers, we touch our suppliers. And we need to think about our actions. And that guided us to a totally unique approach that, again, that's always somebody always asks me about that, because we're kind of taught you got to downsize, right size when economic conditions challenge you. And that's why virtually every company in the country, and the problem is, you never think about the fact that when you let Joe go, who sits at this desk, Mary on one side and Fred on the other side, see Joe get let go. Joe's got 2 young kids. They know he'll be hurt. And the collateral damage, much less to Joe, but to the people who don't get laid off, is horrible. We teach people, you got to do that. You got to keep your company solid. People got to go, they got to go. You got to keep the company solid. And we got through that without doing it. And the COVID, we sell capital equipment, and we've let nobody go in COVID. And our company is extremely strong in COVID, because part of it is our business model. Part of it is our business model is so robust that we are performing well. So that's the 08-09 downturn, where we took a totally different approach, stimulated by our guiding principle of leadership, which said we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people.
I love that story. It feels so hopeful. But one of the facts in your book that is not so hopeful is that when asked, 7 out of 8 people feel like their company doesn't care about them. But your message of sending those in our span of care home each day, knowing that who they are and what they do matters, is again is unusual in the business world. So how can you, as a business and leaders, be taking care of their people, but also taking care of their shareholders?
Well, thanks for reminding me of that, Amy. My granddaughter graduated from Aspen High School 4 years ago. And when I was sitting in the Aspen music tent for that graduation, everybody was cheering as their child, their grandchild, their neighbor, or daughter, son walked up to get the diploma on the stage of the music tent. And yay, all this excitement in the tent. And as my granddaughter walked up, Aiden, to get her diploma, I started crying, because I knew the world we were sending her into. Before the pandemic, when we had peace and prosperity in this country, we had the highest level of peace in the history of the country. and we had the lowest unemployment in 50 years. So people had jobs. They had, they could change jobs and improve their income. They're taking vacation. And we had the highest level of anxiety and depression we have ever had. Why? Because people don't feel cared for. They feel used for somebody else's gain. And so here's the statistics that are absolutely accurate. As Amy said, 88% of all people in this country, 88% say they feel they work for a company that does not care about them. 88% people. Why would you want your daughter, your grandson, your in-laws to get a job when you know there's an 88% chance they're going to go home each night feeling not appreciated? Okay. 3 out of 4 people in this country are disengaged in what they're doing. The Mayo Clinic told us the person you report to at work is more important to your health than your family doctor. Okay. 80, and I was never taught this, never heard this, never occurred to me that the way I would run my business would affect the way our team members would go home and treat their spouse, treat their kids, and behave in our country. So when you see the anger and that came out in racial unrest in the last year, what you're seeing is that anxiety and depression that was in our society with full employment and a strong economy, okay? But people didn't feel good because when they had money and we had peace, because they feel used. 65% of all people, according to Gallup, would give up a salary increase if they could fire their boss, okay? There's a 20% increase in heart attacks on Monday mornings when people go back to work, okay? And 55% of all people would trust a stranger before they would trust their boss. When CEOs complain to me about the cost of healthcare, I say, guys, you are the problem. 74% of all illnesses are chronic. The biggest cause of chronic illness is stress, and the biggest cause of stress is work. We are self-destructing in this country. There's nothing our government can do. I don't care who you favor for president or Congress or Senate. They will have no impact on this issue until business leaders, like the CEO Roundtable did recently, say our people are our responsibility. We need to send them home feeling valued and fulfilled. Because remember, 3 out of 4 people are disengaged in what they're doing today. 3 out of 4 teachers are disengaged in what they're doing today. Because we have hospital administrators, we have school administrators, we don't have leaders. So the issue in our country that troubles me deeply is we're self-destructing for economic gain. I'll tell you one last story that really brings it home. There's a gentleman, a very successful gentleman, who heard me give a speech, and he flew out to Aspen to have dinner with me at the Maroon Creek Club. We're sitting there, and I said, what are you really proud of in your life? And he said, well, I'm known for my $140 million gift to my alma mater. But what I'm really proud of is my minority student athletic scholarship program. I said, wonderful. How many people are you able to help a year with your minority students program? He said 5 or 6. And I said, that's wonderful. How many people work for your company around the world today? He said about 100,000. I said, so you're telling me you really care about these 5 or 6 minority students you can help with a scholarship, and you don't care about the 100,000 people whose life you have in your hand for 40 hours a week? And this incredibly fine gentleman looked at me and he said, I never thought about that. We have a society where we celebrate people who write checks to charity, okay? What a wonderful family. They just wrote a check to the Cancer Society or one of the other great institutes. The greatest act of charity in our country is not the checks we write. It is the way we treat people that we have the privilege of leading and interacting with, and treat them like we would want our son or daughter treated if it was them that we are treating. That is what we desperately need, because we have a society that is basically doesn't know how to care for each other, and we don't feel good regardless of our pay, regardless of the home, regardless of the club. And the behavior we're seeing in our society and where we are sending our kids is a broken world where we use people for our gain, okay? And we don't need them, we lay them off, okay? It's not our fault, downturn in the economy, et cetera. Does that make sense to everybody? That is the issue we face in this country. Until we learn to care for each other, which is through the skills of listening. The greatest act of caring is not talking to somebody, it is listening to somebody. So you can see why I had tears in my eyes when my granddaughter graduated, because I knew the world we were sending them into, a world where they were going to be used and manipulated and discarded when they weren't needed anymore. And they weren't going to be able to go to a place where they feel valued, because Gallup says the number one source of happiness in the world is a good job doing meaningful work with people you enjoy. What do we deny to 88% of all people in this country? The opportunity to go home each night feeling that they matter. And the interesting thing is, I'm not giving you a theory, I'm giving you a fact. This is the way we run our company. And I came through those 3 transformations. It wasn't a book I read, it wasn't a consultant. We didn't think we had a problem. It was just these transformative events that awakened me to the power and the skill of caring. And it starts with, as Amy said, listening, recognizing and celebrating the goodness of others. So I'll leave you with this. This point is a powerful one. Probably now 2 months ago, maybe 10 weeks ago, Bill Urey of Harvard called me, concerned about the state of our country, as all of you are. And Bill and I talked for a little bit. I said, well, Bill, the problem is we don't know how to listen to each other. We're talking to each other, but we're not able to listen to each other. So we don't understand there's different views, there's different feelings. And so we're seeing the conflict. And so Bill and I talked for an hour. And the next morning, he sends me an article from Tom Friedman of the New York Times. And this is really powerful. Tom Friedman wrote an article the next day. He said, we don't have a poverty of money in this country. We have a poverty of dignity in this country. He said, and when people don't feel dignity, they feel humiliated. When they feel humiliated, you will see anger like you never saw before. And he quotes Nelson Mandela, who talks about the same thing that he experienced in South Africa, the poverty of dignity. When people don't feel valued, when they don't feel heard, when they don't feel cared for, they feel not valued and they feel humiliated. What we're experiencing, according to Tom Friedman's article, which I completely agree with, is the poverty of dignity, okay? Money does not create dignity, okay? It's how we treat people. And he goes on to say, which it talks about, again, what Amy talked about, our community listen. He says, what we need in this country is deep listening. He used the word deep. We use empathetic listening, where we learn to listen to each other and open our minds and our hearts to other lenses, looking at the same facts, but seeing things differently, and not dividing countries to start to come together. Because what our country is doing is this. Every day, the media on either side is just amplifying our differences. And we don't understand why everybody doesn't see the same thing the same way. What we need to do is we need to learn to listen to each other and understand our differences. So I think Tom Friedman really amplified. So we use that quote all the time. In our country, the pain you're seeing that our kids, our families, our communities are living with is the poverty of dignity. When people feel used for somebody else's gain, they don't feel a sense of meaning and purpose, and they go home and they treat their spouse, they treat their kids, and they behave in their community because they don't feel valued. Okay, they have good salary, they have good benefits, they drive a nice car, and they live in a nice home, but they don't feel dignity. And that's when you feel listened to, you feel validated and understood, and you feel a sense of dignity. So I think Tom Friedman summarized it perfectly.
Well, I have quite a few more questions, and I am so thankful I could listen to your inspiring message for hours, but I want to, give a chance to some of our other folks online to be able to ask some questions or share any other thoughts they'd like to before I ask more of my questions.
Yes, sir. David.
So I think towards the end of your book, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, so excuse me if I get this wrong. You say you don't really try to convert anyone, or the company doesn't try to force anyone to adhere to the ideology. And you're very welcoming of those people as well. I'd like to hear just the thoughts around that.
Bill Urey, who's incredibly close to us now, he said, and I think the word is called, we have courageous patience. Courageous patience. Every one of us on this call has had a different journey through life and different experiences. And you're all not going to respond to the same stimulus in the same way. So Bill Urey describes our leadership model like a bus on a circuit. The bus pulls up to a team member and say, we're going to open the door to truly human leadership. We're going to put our hand and say, Scott or Emily, would you like to join us? Okay. And you say, and Scott or Emily would say, you know, I hear you, but I'm just not ready to get on the bus yet. And we say, that's okay. We'll be back. And the bus goes around the circuit and pulls up again this time. And the door woman said, David, are you ready to join us? And you say, you know, not yet. And it's called courageous patience. We accept that everybody is at a different place, just like our kids in school are in a different place in learning. And that we want people to step in, not be pulled into our culture. And when the Harvard people were visiting our operation, they met a gentleman who was a Navy SEAL, Randall Fleming, tough guy. I mean, he's the kind of guy if you saw an alley you'd duck because he is built like a battleship. And he was one of the guys that everybody said, stay away from. Well, he has become a professor at our university teaching people to care. He went from one extreme to the other. Now, that's an example. Harvard wanted to write a book on him because his story was so extreme. The other way people ask your question, David, is what do you do about the people who don't get it? I get that every time I give a speech because we tend to focus not on the people that do get it. We tend to focus on the people that don't. And what I say is, I am sure there's some people that don't get it. I just don't know who they are. So we spend all of our time, David, catching the people who do get it and holding it up and saying, thank you. We have an award called the Guiding Principle Leadership Award, where people nominate their peer, a peer or two, who they believe embodies our leadership principles. And then we have a committee of team members who pick the winner, and then we give them a car to drive for a week. And so we have this big ceremony outside our plants around the country. And we read the qualities of the winner, okay? And we say, okay, this quality, this quality. Mary, would you come forward and receive the award? Mary's overwhelmed. She starts crying. 400 people. She starts walking up to the little stage and the shiny cars there that she gets to drive. As Mary walks up, her husband, her two kids, the rector of her church, and her brother-in-law walk out from behind the stage to see Mary, and they're crying. And everybody else feels the emotion. And it's a profound ceremony where we recognize people for their goodness. The beauty, which we didn't realize when we started this, people spend their time not, in a plan of 400, we'll get 100, 120 nominations for their goodness. And for everybody that's nominated, we write a letter to their home that says, your husband, your wife, your son or daughter was just nominated for their leadership qualities, and we just want to share how proud we are of them. And that has almost as much benefit. And so we've really tapped into a profound sense. And the good news is when we recognize Mary in accounting, all 400 people feel good because they nominated and they know she deserved it. So in our society, we are inundated with the brokenness every day by turning on the TV. In our company, we're inundated with the goodness of the world every day because we have the Guiding Principle Leadership Award, we have the High Five Award, we have the E3 Award. We have a number of ways that we teach. One of the biggest classes we teach is recognition and celebration. How do you let people know in your care that they matter? And we teach people how to recognize people, not just in big awards, every day. It's a key leadership skill because we know in raising kids, if you don't compliment them 5 times more than you suggest something they could do better, it's harder. So we took our parenting skills, we applied them to the company. So we spend more time on the goodness in people than the brokenness. Does that make sense? Another question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks. And remember, we operate all over the world. This is a global issue. It is not an American issue. We don't teach leaders how to care. We teach leaders how to use people for financial success. And that's why we see the humiliation and the anger in our country. Not because of a political system. The political system just amplifies it. foundation is when we have people in our care for 40 hours a week, if we send them home feeling good about each other, we would dramatically improve the culture and reduce the amount of anxiety and depression in this country. It is at a rampant level, and universities say young students coming into American university today have an epidemic of anguish. We have the highest level of anxiety and depression ever in young students entering colleges today.
I have a quick question. This is Emily over here.
Okay.
Going back to Dave's question, I'm just curious how it translates into hiring. Is this something that you look for in candidates or something you instill and teach over time?
The answer is no. We do not screen for caring. I would say to you that I believe, kind of a little bit like Ronald Reagan said, I believe in the goodness of people. I think there's goodness in everybody. We just need to find it. And I have seen, and we've been doing this 15 years, so this is not a short-term experiment, but I have seen businesses transform. Remember, we're the combination of 115 acquisitions around the world. This is not one family born, and just grow. And it's a universal truth. And so we don't screen for that, okay? We screen for skills, and we believe we can change people. Now, if somebody came in and yelled at us, we probably wouldn't hire them. But I mean, I have seen people transform before my eyes. And so I believe in the goodness of people, and I believe there's goodness in everybody, and we have courageous patience to find it. And so we don't screen for these qualities, okay? We screen, but I will tell you, 80% of the people we hire say our culture is the main reason that they want to join our company. Finding talent is not an issue when you have a culture like this. The company in Serbia, they had 4 bids higher than our bid and picked us because of our culture. Our new CFO came from General Electric, picked us because of our culture. We just hired a new guy in our packaging division from Detroit, and he said, I feel a calling to be a part of this. It's almost a calling to be a part of our company, and the pride our people feel in being respected and feeling cared for is beyond your imagination, because it just doesn't exist. You might have a nice boss. Remember, the language of business is boss, supervisors, and managers. I took management classes, got a management degree, and got a job in management. So what did I try and do? I tried to manage people, right? That's a manager. Name anybody in your life you can manage. Name anybody in your life that wants to be managed. Why do we teach people how to be managers instead of leaders, coaches, and mentors? Okay. Why do we do you really want a supervisor? Do you want to have your job and have a supervisor or a boss? We have the most and we fire people. You know where that came from? The French firing squad. The language of business is atrocious, and it leads to atrocious behavior, which describes the manipulation of people for the organizational success. So we find good people everywhere in the world who want to be a part of this movement. So the journey from management to leadership is listening, recognizing, celebration, and serving others. That's the journey. Well, Amy, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to stand on every hill I can, share with everybody I can this blessing I've been given that I think could profoundly change the world. And instead of listening to politicians, we ought to listen to each other, and we ought to begin to care for each other, because why would you want to bring kids into the world as we see it dividing today with the hatred and the bitterness and the lack of dignity? So again, we can address the poverty of dignity tomorrow by simply learning to listen to each other and value each other. And we can have the world that we are intended to have, where people thoroughly enjoy and have a chance for a life of meaning and purpose and live in harmony with each other. And so it's really up to us. We don't need to worry. You don't need to turn on Fox News or CNN or anybody else. You can just say, look at it. And let me leave you with one short story how this applies to every one of you. I gave a speech at the Nairobi University in Amsterdam at the invitation of some McKinsey partners. 2 of the partners who hosted me, one had to leave to go to Manchester after my speech at the university, and the other hosted me at the McKinsey office in Amsterdam. So I give my speech, the one partner leaves, the other partner, and I'm sitting in a circle in their offices. About an hour later, we had lunch and we're starting to talk. And the other partner who had left came in and sat down. I said, McKelly, I thought you were going to Manchester. He said, well, I got to tell you a story. As you know, I heard your speech this morning, but I had to leave to go to Manchester to a client. And I got in a cab with a relatively young cab driver, and he got disoriented and he made some wrong turns. We got stuck in a traffic jam, and it's clear I was going to miss my flight. Irritated as hell. Couldn't believe this cab driver was so incompetent. He said, I just said, take me back to the office. And as I got to the office, as I got out of the cab, very frustrated with the cab driver, all of a sudden I remember your talk that everybody's somebody's precious child. And instead of seeing this young man as a cab driver who had messed up, I saw him as somebody's son who had made a mistake. And I talked to him like I'd like somebody to talk to my son. That is how every one of us could live this every day, with the person at the checkout in the grocery store, the person at the gas station. If we learn to care for people through listening, we could profoundly begin to change the world every day with small acts of generosity, where we simply listen and care to people and not see people as a function, but see them as somebody's precious child. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope this message resonates with your heart and gives you some sense of hope, because it's really up to us, not the politicians, not the general manager of the club. It's up to us in the way we carry out our life every day, to listen and care for people that we interact with every day. So thank you for this opportunity. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to find out more about Bob Chapman and Raj Sisodia's book, Everybody Matters, Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family, go to everybodymattersbook.com. For updates on the book, this podcast, and for a lot of great content and insight, don't forget to connect with us on the web at Barry-Wehmiller.com, on Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, on Facebook and LinkedIn, and check out our blog, trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks again for listening. We really appreciate you. Take care.